size. And
Oh,
the mouse works now.
is this a touch screen?
Yeah, but not really within Windows. It's just only like if you want to go back.
So when we vote with the mouse?
Yeah,
No, the mouse is only going to be for like when you're in Windows.
Yeah.
okay.
But you got to like tap it
Not
basically
right
to
now,
go
'cause
back
it's
and forth,
not on the
and
agenda.
then you click
No,
here
but
for-
it will be.
Some good
But
backup.
the vote thing will
Okay.
come up somewhere in here.
Do you tap on the screen or use the mouse to vote?
Tap on the
I'll
screen.
explain that when it comes up.
The only time you'll really use the mouse is if you're already in the PC here. That's the only time the mouse actually works.
Okay, so where's the vote
I
show up?
imagine, and it's
It'll
a
be like
different
down here.
Oh,
environment.
okay.
Yeah, it'll just appear.
Okay,
Yeah, right now they're all on. If you ever need to turn it off, your microphone, you
Yeah.
can do it right there. Where it's red,
yeah,
just tap on that and it turns it off or on.
okay.
Right
They
now
would,
they're
they
all
would
on.
never notice,
Morning, Bill.
like,
How you doing? Good. Did you miss me?
We do 5 more minutes before we start
I
here.
was in Europe.
5.
hey.
I'm assuming you're
well,
coming,
as
right?
soon as-
Gil and Ed?
Read the news.
Oh, they're lost.
What's that?
We have to vote on it, though.
Is not here? Gil,
Better hurry up and learn.
okay.
Oh, wow, secret stuff.
All right. Throw that over there. Well, we can start. We've got enough.
Oops, I'm sorry.
We just got a couple lost people.
Hmm?
We have a couple that are still lost.
Okay.
They're still lost. You went there too, right?
Yeah, I did. Here comes Gil. We'll wait till he comes.
Oh, this is really nice.
You don't have to bring your,
Who was here?
Brought it today.
But I can't get any work
You
done.
can hide behind the screen.
right, oh, good morning.
Morning, Gil.
No, this was regarding this meeting.
We'll get you up to date. Good morning. Welcome to the Tulare County Planning Commission for August 14th, 2019. We're in the new Visalia Hall Council Chambers, and we're starting a little late this morning because there was some orientation going on with the new computing system. Information concerning the following agenda items is available for public consideration during normal working hours at the Resource Management Agency Permit Center, 5961 South Mooney Boulevard, Visalia, California. The staff will assist in answering questions. For further information about the Planning Commission, see the last page. All public hearings are scheduled for certain times or as soon thereafter as the matter can be heard. All non-timed items will be considered following the public hearings or when time permits. Persons wishing to speak on any of the agenda items who may have made a political contribution of more than $250 to any commissioner in the last 12 months must indicate this when speaking. May I have a roll call, please?
Here.
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 Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Moving on to item 2, public comment. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. Under state law, matters presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon by the Planning Commission at this time. For items appearing on the agenda, the public will be invited to make comments at the time the item comes up for Planning Commission consideration. So that all interested parties have an opportunity to speak, any individual or person addressing the Planning Commission may be limited at the discretion of the chair, that is me, Note, in order to be considered by the Planning Commission, testimony on public hearing items must be given at the time scheduled for public hearing. At all times, please use the microphone and state your name and address. For the record, we are being recorded this morning. And as a courtesy to others, please turn off your electronic devices, cell phones, etc., as a courtesy to others. At this time, I will open the hearing to the public for comment on non-agenda items. Are there any members of the public that are here this morning that would like to make a comment on non-agenda items? If not, I will close the testimony to the public at this time, and we will move on to item 3. Approval of the minutes for July 31st, 2019. I have just a quick comment on that, and I was recused on this particular item at the last session. Item C, minor revision TSM 19-002, tentative subdivision map TSM 773, DR Horton, Sean Day, AW Engineering. Just a question on the comments that were on, I guess it's on page 5 at the top. Just reading through, it said housing or remotely similar structures, Cliff Ronk with DR Horton explained. The size of the lots would be 1,200 to 1,800 homes. I think that's 12 to 1,800 square feet.
That is correct.
Is that correct? So the record shall be corrected at that point. Thank you very much. Any other comments?
Yes, confession that I had to recuse myself, so I cannot say that what was said in C is correct. It wasn't there.
Well, I'm reading, I read the testimony.
What I'm asking, is that good enough? What you're reading here is what they,
Right.
but I didn't hear it.
No, and thank you for the correction, even if you were not there.
I wasn't there either.
We're good.
May I have a vote on the approval of minutes? Sorry, a motion.
I'll make a motion with that correction.
I'll second.
Roll call.
Do we push the buttons?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Touch.
Dang,
Touch it in the bottom, Gil.
what's the mouse for?
Got it. Motion is passed. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 4, public hearing. 4A, setback variance PSV 19-002, Crown Fruit. Categorical exemption and setback variance to allow the construction of a 6-foot tall security fence in order to comply with the Food Safety Modernization Act within the 50-foot building line setback area along Avenue 8 and Road 188 on approximately 20 acres of a 102-acre parcel in the AE 20 exclusive agriculture 20-acre minimum zone. Site is located northeast of Delano, approximately 5.5 miles east of State Route 99. And our contact this morning is Mr. David Alexander. Good morning, David.
The categorical exemption and setback variance number PSV 19-002 requested by Crown Fruit of 18723 Avenue 8 in Delano to allow the construction of a 6-foot tall security fence in order to comply with the Food Safety Modernization Act within the 50-foot building line setback area. Project is compatible with this because the project setback variance will not change the land use or density. Entitlement is found in section 17-19-1215. The building line setback ordinance as amended, states that a variance may be granted if said granting is in harmony with the general purpose and intent, and so that the spirit of the ordinance shall be observed. public safety and welfare served, and substantial justice done. This is the aerial and existing zoning maps. All surrounding properties are zoned AE20 and contains various agriculture and processing plants. And you can see on the other side of Road 188, that is also Crown Fruit processing plant. This is the site plan. In order to approve this variance, the following findings shall be made. A, practical difficulties. B, unnecessary hardships. Or C, results inconsistent with the general purpose of this article would result through the strict and literal interpretation and enforcement of this article with respect to the proposed improvements. Factors that support these findings are as follows. The strict and literal interpretation of the ordinance would create practical difficulties and unnecessary hardships by depriving the property owner of valuable parking and operational space for the entering and exiting of tractor trailers visiting the berry and tree nut processing and packing plant. The parcel lies on the south side of Avenue 8 and west side of Road 188. The ultimate right-of-way on Avenue 8 is 60 feet, and also on Road 188 is 60 feet. It's been recommended by Tulare County Public Works Traffic and Engineering Division that the proposed chain link fence be constructed along the ultimate right-of-way of line of Road 188, offset 30 feet from the center line. The applicant proposes to build the chain link fence 35 feet from the center line on Road 188 and 40 feet from the center line on Avenue 8. Therefore, the variance would not negatively impact any future widening of either Road 188 or Avenue 8. The proposal has met the required findings for approval. The public notice for the project was mailed to surrounding property owners and published in the Exeter Sun-Gazette with a 10-day public comment period. Staff has not received any comments regarding this project. This ends staff report. Do you have any questions?
Any questions for David? If there are no questions, this public hearing, I will open the testimony to the public at this time. Are there any members of the public that would like to come up and speak on behalf or opposed to the project? Is the owner here? Would anyone like to speak? If you'd like to come up and speak, you could, if you so choose. Please state your name and address.
I'm Gary Chastain. I live at 3939 West Oriole Court, Visalia. I'm just here representing the company and the owner on this regard. I appreciate the work that the individuals have done on this, and I'm just here basically to reiterate the request and to answer any questions or concerns regarding this setback.
Are there any questions for Mr. Chastain? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak at this time? If not, I will close testimony to the public, and I will look for comments and or emotion from my commissioners. Is it working?
How do you do that?
I'll make a motion that we approve a categorical exemption, consistent and state secret guidelines
There we go.
pursuant to Title 14 California Code Regulations, Section 15061B3. One 5301 Class 1 pertaining to existing facilities and conditionally approved special use permit PS 106.
I'll second the motion.
Roll call, vote.
My
Through the
computer
chair,
is,
through the chair, through the chair, we had a comment.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
The wrong motion was read. Can you please read the correct motion?
I just told them to.
I restate my motion to approve categorical exemption consistent with the California state 5 pertaining to minor alterations to land, utility or conditions of the temporary deal.
Roll call.
I'll second the motion.
Right, you need a second.
I second the motion.
Okay, we're a little disoriented this morning, that's okay.
Cast your vote.
Just Joe being Joe. Nobody gets that? Please vote.
It's coming back online, so.
What is your vote?
The screen is the load
Yes.
screen.
Working?
I can vote for you here.
Yeah, that's,
It work?
Yes.
To the secret.
Good job, Maria.
cool. I killed the system.
We knew there'd be days like this.
Go. 6-0. Thank you very much. The motion passes. Moving on to item 5A. This is a continued public hearing. And it's a special use permit PSP 18-106 and zone variance PZV 18-020 Rainbow Orchards. I'm not going to read through this whole thing. We did this once before. This basically has to do with composting, and our person presenting this morning is Ms. Dana Metlin. Good morning, Dana.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Is there a way that I can look at the port?
You mean the packet?
You mean the packet?
Yeah, the packet.
He wants to go online.
Previous
and-
meeting?
There wasn't a packet.
No, he's talking about the packet material we got. Can you go on here and look at that?
Well,
Previous meetings.
well, the last one, you're talking about this last one, as an example.
But also this one here from the
I don't know if you guys are set up that way yet, but that's
Oh,
what they want to
oh.
do, is get online and be able to look at their packets.
Oh, the old packet, okay.
Yeah.
They came back.
That's
Okay,
asking
so,
for a
so
lot.
how do I go from, okay,
You do that to get,
and then,
and then do it again, go back, and then toggle, or UPC.
okay,
See, it's just a matter of, that's the only thing you do though, is just,
not this.
yeah, it's just,
That'll
yeah,
kill it.
I know, like a phone, yeah,
Yeah.
and the mouse only works within Windows.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So we're taking a few minutes here just to check out
To get technically up to speed.
the documentation behind this
Yeah.
particular application. So please bear with us. New system,
I'm back.
new glitches.
Yeah.
That's working pretty well, actually.
Geez, when I worked for Sun Microsystems, we used to say we put the dot in .com. That was our slogan, our marketing slogan.
Lots happened since then.
Pardon?
A lot has happened.
I still have my manuals, and the engineering workstations were like this big.
I remember when push button phones were just coming in. I'm like that old. It was great.
Well, we haven't even had iPhones longer than
So how would we bring them up on a regular basis?
From two different meetings.
Planner, launch it, or would it just be in
22nd
here?
and
How do we-
June
how do
12th.
we launch each of these?
Oh, there was no packet for the continuing
No,
meeting.
we know there wasn't, but it just, if there was a packet, who would launch it?
Through the chair,
Would launch it?
through the chair, Wayne, through the chair, if you'd like to call a recess while we work out this issue, or there is no packet available to you today if the documents were provided to
Right,
you already,
we
so.
know that, we know that.
So if we'd like to take a break while we figure this out, that'd probably be the more, the
We'll take,
better way to proceed.
What Mr. Bach is recommending that we take a 5-minute break, or we'll take a 10-minute just to be sure.
would you be able to, so everybody can see it?
14th, 2019. We're on item 5, continued public hearings. Item 5A, special use permit PSP 18-106 and 6 and zone variance PZV 18-020, Rainbow Orchards. Ms. Dana Metlin.
Good morning. You
Is
know, I'm
everybody happy
actually-
now? Okay.
You're happy?
Sort of happy. All right,
Technical stuff.
all right.
Just make sure.
To the chair, Dana, if you could fast forward to the recommendation at this point. So the planning commission had requested that staff go and meet with the people in opposition and the applicant themselves, and staff has achieved that. And this is, to remind everybody, a public hearing that started way back in May 22nd. And we have continued this to today, August 14th, so that staff can meet with the parties regarding further considerations of conditions and/or compromises, which would limit the impacts of the neighboring property to the west. And staff finds as follows: that myself, Associate Director Mike Washam, Director Reed Shanky, and Engineer 4 Mike Winton visited the site on July 2nd. We found the site a fully developed composting facility with slatted chain link fencing located to an adjacent approved use permit, where a pond. The site was similar to most composting facilities, but less impactful compared to those other composting facilities in Tulare County. The furrows were lower, roughly 4 to 5 feet tall. The material drier because of the holes, and flies were limited compared to other pure manure sites, such as Mike Clark Trucking, Harvest Power, or other facilities we've seen throughout the county. And others that take green waste, including diverted garbage from the landfills or fats, oils, or greases. So this is much more akin to agriculture in nature, as it's used by an agricultural producer. As you just saw, a variance for a large-scale crown fruit producing facility that's approved in the AE20 that's under the Williamson Act and under a use permit. At the meeting we did hold, per your request, the additional conditions of approval, which are before you today, were discussed. We also discussed other compromises, but we're not really hearing any additional conditions at that time. So all that was discussed was a little bit of the past and how we could further limit the impacts to the neighbors. What they were looking for was some kind of guarantee. And although that's not possible, what we did have the applicant produce is the letter before you today from an air quality specialist. And Mr. Guerra will go into a little bit of detail forthcoming, as I'm sure the applicant would like to as well, and as the neighbor would like to discuss. They asked that we confirm that there would be limited impacts to the property, and we are confirming that with this letter by an air quality specialist, Elena Nuno, if you could correct me on the pronunciation, you've worked with her before, from Stantec Consulting. She has presented the commission with a letter attesting to the fact that these measures go beyond most composting facilities and would adequately address any concerns. Nothing we've heard so far at a staff level changes our recommendation. And we did discuss or allow to be discussed anything the Planning Commission had suggested we discuss at that meeting. But at this time, I would like Mr. Guerra to present kind of his insights as to the letter that was being presented to the Planning Commission.
Affirm and confirm that I have only been in Nina for almost 15 years. She is an air quality expert. She is very qualified to comment to this issue. I have high regard for her opinion. I work with Elena at the Valley Air District, so I've known her for quite some time. She's effective, she's professional, and she's a very scientific person. She's accredited from Stanford, so I consider her very well qualified to make this recommendation. She's very familiar with air district rules, policies, procedures, and her summary is on the spot. The only thing that I would attribute is we have conditions of approval, but the district's regulation 8, which I authored, the dust control rule, does have another control technique available, and that's reduced vehicles.
the original fence was 8 feet, wasn't it? In the-
Through the chair, that's the variance that would be approved with this was
So
for
we're
8
going
feet.
to 15 now, is that
We're
right?
going to 15, and they are planting trees 15 feet apart, as well as adding the added water requirements. Pretty consistent with the air district, but we also did state in our conditions that they would more effectively do that than the air district would necessarily require, so that all dust does stay on site.
Any comments from my fellow commissioners?
I have a question about this paper, because it goes 24 to 34. Is it all we were supposed to get?
That is correct. That was just the added conditions that are highlighted in yellow for you today. The remaining conditions are in your original packet.
Okay.
Okay, this is a public hearing, so at this time, and I don't know, did we close?
Regardless of whether we close it, you could
We'll reopen it.
open it up again, please.
We'll reopen the hearing to the public for comment. If anyone in the audience, members of the public would like to come up and speak either for or against the materials that have been presented, please do so at this time. Is there anyone that would like to do that? Raise your hand. Yes? Please state your name and address, please, for the record.
Yes, good morning, members. David Leith, 6051 North Fresno Street in Fresno, California. I'm the attorney for Kavakovich 5 Farms. I've been here at the prior meetings. I'm not going to rehash what we've already expressed as far as our concerns. However, 2 things are important. Number 1 is that we have had an ongoing dialogue, but we just received all of this information this morning. And so we have not had a chance to evaluate this information. We have not had a chance to discuss any of this information with our consultants. Number 2 is during our meeting with the RMA, it was my understanding that we were going to, in addition to these proposals, we were also going to receive some information concerning the effectiveness, or at least the environmental study behind the mesh netting that was part of the Harvest Power project, but we never received that.
Through the chair, if we can answer that question, at the time, there was no environmental study behind that mesh that was just requested by the neighboring property owner. That had nothing to do with their district rules or anything else. Those were offers in compromise.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification. So this then is truly a matter of first impression, whether or not this 15-foot mesh fence will be effective, since it was just apparently just something that was agreed to between the parties.
Through the chair, if we can answer that as well. Harvest Power does have that in place, and so it's not necessarily a matter of first impression. It has been effectively providing that for many years now.
Okay, based on what studies?
Based on the amount of complaints we've had since then in regards to the neighbors who were very sensitive to that issue at the time.
My understanding is the neighbors also had their property purchased so that it was diverted from that original use. Okay, so in any event, members, I'm here because we are just, as I said, receiving this information for the first time today, and we need to have time to evaluate it and study it, and whether or not we'll have my clients be able to agree to it.
How much time do you need?
Yeah, I would,
Well, I'd like to make it as quickly as we can, because we've been going on this for 2 sessions.
yes,
So
absolutely.
it shouldn't be, brain surgery. You ought to be able to fix it, right? You ought to be able to respond to it as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so by the next meeting,
Next meeting.
yes.
Is that a date certain?
Yeah, well, I don't know when the next meeting is, but
I don't have my calendar in front of me.
2 weeks,
2 weeks,
14 plus 13.
the 28th?
20
The 28th of August?
August 28th.
Okay, by August 28th,
I believe that should be sufficient.
do I have any objections?
Through the chair, we'd like to hear others before
All right.
make any motions.
And finally, on behalf of my client, Kenny Kavakovich is here, and he wanted to express some additional
All
ongoing
right,
concerns.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public who would like to come up and speak? Please state your name and address.
Good morning. My name is Kenny Kovakovich III, Kenneth, formerly. I'm a supervisor of farming operations.
And address?
Five Farms. The business address is 14276 County Line Road in
Thank you.
Delano,
Thank you.
93215. Permanent address if you need it, 1923 Valverde Lane in Delano, 93215.
Thank you.
Appreciate the time this morning and appreciate the time that you've provided on behalf of Kovakovich Five Farms, David Leith, into this matter. We have had an ongoing concern, as David mentioned. This document was requested and discussed during the meeting with the RMA at the end of July, and as he mentioned, we hadn't received it until today. And some of the, just to be representative of the family and the farming operation, we completely respect the staff's time to go out and view the property, and the property that my family owns is west of the composting area. Completely understand the prevailing winds do direct the wind away from the property. However, it was discussed that the flies, the dust, the heat was not a concern during that July visit, and I can attest to that right now, July and August, there hasn't been as much of a concern, but in the spring months, it was pretty ridiculous, and it's been an ongoing thing whenever there is a lot of activity on that property. The fly activity is pretty, it's a nuisance, but it's also the health concerns that the family has just from visually looking at the dust, the flies, but also seeking the advice of the pest management company that my family uses. It didn't take them very long to voice the concerns of E. coli, bringing in the raw material, churning the raw manure, using doing all the composting activity, understanding that the end product is more than likely very clean and free of all E. coli, but it's really the raw material that comes in and the constant activity throughout the year, and the adverse effect that it has on the neighboring crop. And in past years, this composting process started, as I'm sure everyone's aware, back in late 2017. The family decided to cut out a portion of the vineyard that was used for the fresh market, and decided that from a health standpoint, they could not honestly or ethically put those grapes on the fresh market. Decided to use a large portion of the ranch to specifically grow for juice, and that was in the 2017 crop, and that decision has been continued for the 2018 and 2019 crop. And it's not just a matter of the past, but the ongoing. If the composting continues, it's going to be a concern of the families for as long as the property's there. And it's not just this crop, but crops in the future. So appreciate everyone's time.
Okay, any questions? Yeah, no? Please state your name and address.
Good morning, members of the Planning Commission. My name is John Kinsey, 255 East River Park Circle in Fresno. I represent Seton Pistachio and Rainbow Orchards. To the state, any recommended mitigation that's been suggested by the Kovakovich family has been accepted by Seton. I think to the point that before the June 12th Planning Commission meeting, Seton had imposed mitigation on this project far beyond what was required from any composting facility in this county. And I think it speaks volumes that the county's composting regulations as they currently exist and the air quality district's regulations as they exist have not resulted in any issues in this county regarding E. coli resulting from these facilities. That being said, we understand and we want to be a good neighbor. And as a result of that, Seton has implemented and agreed to mitigation far beyond what's required for those facilities. Now, on June 12th, at the last Planning Commission meeting, we recounted that mitigation that we were going above and beyond. And ultimately, the Planning Commission directed us to have further settlement negotiations with the neighboring property owner. We had a decent amount of availability over the next 2 months, but unfortunately, due to circumstances beyond our control, that meeting wasn't able to get scheduled until July 30th, so about 6 or 7 weeks after that Planning Commission meeting. That was unfortunate, but I obviously wanted to keep the ball rolling because I agree, talking helps narrow issues. So I actually sent several emails and copied the county on them over that 6-week period saying, hey, to narrow the issues before June 30th, let us know, what mitigation do you want? And that was met by radio silence. On July 30th, we actually did have that meeting. And we had a good dialogue at that meeting. I think we narrowed the issues pretty significantly. But really, the only new request that came out of that meeting was a request to provide some scientific opinion that the mitigation would make a difference, and in particular, the mitigation regarding the fencing. Now, obviously, July 30th through August 14th isn't a whole lot of time to retain a new consultant, get that consultant up to speed, provide the technical details to that consultant, and then to have that consultant write a report. 14 days is a pretty short period of time to do that, especially during the summer when people take vacations. And we not only went and we did that, we went to a national engineering firm. We hired, and they don't just hire anybody at these national firms, but we went to this firm. We found Elena Nuno, and Elena obviously has impeccable credentials, and she knows this valley, and she knows the air quality conditions in this valley better than just about anybody else in this area. And she turned this around in really short order and frankly did a bang-up job, and we appreciate that. But that request wasn't made until July 30th. But that said, they said jump, we said how high, we got it done, and we've done everything that's been asked of us to date. And ultimately, what Ms. Nuno said is that this is, in fact, adequate mitigation. And she looked not only at the fencing, but she looked at everything else. And I think her opinion in particular was focused on the fact, in addition to other things, that just regular composting activity, complying with best composting standards, is really what makes the most difference. Because heat, to the extent any pathogens remain by the time that they're transported to the property, and that really isn't the case with what we're dealing with here, but to the extent any pathogens remain, those are killed by the composting process and normal composting practices. Now, that being said, she did look at the additional mitigation, and ultimately what she found is, in summary, and I'm reading directly from her report, the proposed fencing and other operational measures are sufficient mitigation to address the adjacent landowners' concerns regarding E. coli and potential drift. The proposed mitigation goes beyond measures that are applied at most composting facilities. And those opinions, of course, are supported by quite a wealth of technical data. Now, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, and I'm going to do one better than that. I actually wanted to show you the type of material that's going to be used. This actually blocks 88% of even wind. And so if the commission would like, I do have a sample of ultimately what's going to be used. Understanding, of course, that this is just one more measure to prevent that type of drift. Because here, it's really the composting in and of itself that will provide the protection. May I approach? Okay, thank you.
So are you going to wrap this up?
Yes. Ultimately, we do appreciate opportunities to further discuss issues with the neighboring properties, but at some point, we do need to get to a point where the additional demands stop, and it is a little bit frustrating to have first heard this demand for a report, and in fact met that demand, provided everything that's been requested, and then to have a request for further delay, notwithstanding the fact that we moved mountains, frankly, to get the report in front of this commission within that 14-day period. And unless the commission has any further questions, I'd be happy to rest.
Any questions? Well, I would suggest that the Stantec report perhaps be viewed, or Ms. Nuno Nuno, maybe it's Nuno, perhaps consult with them or have a session with them. That's a recommendation I would make. Any other comments? Also view the material that's just been passed out. Any other comments from the public at this time?
Equipment maintain wind barriers sufficient to limit visible dust emissions to 20% capacity and with less than 50% porosity. Like the fences, the wind barriers, patrolman at A1 above, which is watering, has to also be. I would say that example fence of the street more than sufficient to prevent the dust emissions from going by because the air district, porosity was 50%, and that was twice the air district. I would say that based on that, the air district has to know that if you got 50%, you're going to do a really good job. Sufficient. This is my professional background. Makes me that would be more than sufficient.
So noted. Thank you, Hector. Are there any other members of the public that have a comment at this time? If not, I'm going to close the testimony to the public. Staff, there was recommendation by the attorney, Mr. Lee, to extend this to a date certain, August 28th. Are you okay with that?
Through the chair, in all fairness, they were just provided the information at this late time. We haven't seen any substantial evidence coming the other way from them to change any of our opinions, but nonetheless, in fairness, so that they're more comfortable with the information, we'd also like to put out the warning, as has been stated to us by the applicant, that we can't do this forever. So I think you've addressed opposition's attorney well enough to know that this will probably be the final hearing, the next one. So staff would agree with the recommendation to continue it to date certain, August 28th, 2019.
Would it be appropriate for them to meet with Stantec?
I don't know if it would be appropriate as far as that we staff can meet with those in opposition to provide more information if they would like. And they're always able to meet with the applicant as well, but I wouldn't necessarily force them to bring their consultant out. But if the applicant would be willing to do that, I think that would be helpful.
Okay. All right. Yes, sir.
I can provide the revenue to clients, if you will, the time that there's an issue. For the use of staff report that I analyze every single control technique, how much it costs, how effectively it works, how efficient. So we do have that information available. It's available.
Okay. All right. So noted. Thank you. So I'll look for a motion from my fellow commissioners to continue to date certain, August 28th, 2019. Do I have a motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We'll have a vote, please.
This votes on that motion, not on what's on the screen,
Right.
right?
And-
Okay.
Are you voting? You've got it? You're okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay, good. Did everyone vote?
Got an answer, yes? So we're not on what it says up there, but
No.
on the motion.
On the continuation.
To continue.
No, to continue. Results, there we go. 6 yes, no, 0. The motion passes. This will be continued to August 28th, 2019. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 6, Director's Report.
Through the chair, Aaron Bach, Planning Director. Just to give you an update on our community planning efforts, we are meeting actively with Lemon Cove. We've had one meeting, and it was successfully held at the Sanitation District's house. And we are hopefully or anticipating to get that actual community plan out and done before the end of the calendar year. We have meetings scheduled with Cutler Rossi during their open house sessions in 2 weeks and 3 weeks, both in Cutler and Rossi. And we can provide those details to the commission on when we're going to actually be out there. And in addition, we are currently moving forward on the Matheny grant we recently received for climate action. We have a meeting this Wednesday night, again at somebody's house in the Matheny community. But it's been widely discussed at the state, and I think there's anticipation that the product that we'll put forward will be something new and novel as far as the ability to get other grant funding off, piggyback for future grant funding. City of Fresno was successful in getting $70 million off a similar type grant, so hopefully that will help fund infrastructure improvements in the community. So we're working very hard on that. We're also working hard on going after the SB2 money with the awards sometime next year, but the grants deadline is hovering out there around November. But we have some good word from HCD. We were designated $310,000, similar to the city of Visalia. So it's a lot of money that we could do a lot of more studies with for our general plan and meeting some of the concerns in regards to vehicle miles traveled, SIGMA, and climate adaptation and resiliency. So we look forward to working on that over the next coming year. But some of those deadlines are looming out in front of us, and we are moving swiftly to meet those demands. From an economic development front, if Mr. Washam would like to come up and introduce anybody, that this would be a great opportunity to do that. And,
Two quick questions on what you said on Matheny.
Yeah.
How many houses are out there, and isn't the city of Tulare,
about 300, and the
city of Tulare also participating in trying to get?
well, they've already provided water, but they'll be they are aware of the grant, and we're actually actively working with them on Souls Tract and Live Oak tracks out there as far as doing a feasibility studies to connect them to sewer there. So we are a little bit more involved with them. Yeah. Good. Mr. Washam.
Thank you, Mike Washam, RMA. I will take this opportunity to introduce a member in the audience here. John, this is John Washam, my son. He's going to be going to Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo.
Good school.
In about a month. Don't say, okay, because I went to Pomona, so.
Also a good school.
So he's going to be studying city and regional planning. So he's getting a little experience here with the county before he goes on.
Sure you want to do that?
So anyway,
Yes.
yes, yeah, it's a good program at San Luis Obispo. So, as far as economic development, we're seeing good activity. Again, our building permits for the full year were slightly down, but the value of those permits was higher by I don't know, $10 million or $15 million over the previous year. So a few smaller projects, but the ones that we were doing are a little bit bigger and larger, and we're going to see that continuing. Goshen right now is a buzz with development and proposals and all sorts of stuff going on out there. So in 5 years from now, I don't think anybody will recognize Goshen as what it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So there's a lot of activity in multiple sectors of our economy, in agriculture, light industrial, and even healthcare. Again, we're seeing an uptick in rural medical clinics. We're putting one in. There's one going in Sierra View. Medical Center is putting one in Terabella currently. They've got their building permits, so they should be starting groundwork very soon there. They're still trying to overcome water issues in Strathmore, but they want to put one in Strathmore as well, and they're eyeing a couple other locations as well. So there's activity there. So there's a lot of good activity going on in throughout the county. I know that the short-term rental ordinance will be coming before your commission. We're shooting for the second meeting in September. We went up, we presented a draft to the Three Rivers Town Hall meeting, and there's lots of comments that have been received, so staff is working on making some revisions to the draft ordinance, finalizing that, and then bringing that to your commission the end of September, and hopefully getting to the board either October or November to have that adopted. And as you know, there's other activities and proposals for the Three Rivers area going on currently too. So there's a lot of activity. We're still waiting for the hotel. The hotel really won't have to come through the Planning Commission, but we're waiting on some design plans from them. Hopefully that will be coming forward sooner than later. So I think that's really.
Has there been any studies on how those businesses were actually affected in Goshen with the new exit and so forth?
What you mean the ones that were existing and
complained, yeah.
Well, that would, I'm not aware of a study per se of that, but I know that Caltrans, you know, the impacted businesses were for the right-of-ways and all that went through a litigation and a resolution to that. So
I'm talking about the ones that remain, not the ones that were taken out. So
no, the ones that remain. I'm talking about the ones that remain too. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There was some impacted on the. Essentially, you're opening up new development on 3 of the 4 quadrants of that new interchange. The one to the south southwest was the one that was the area that was mostly impacted as far as restrictions, as far as access. And that went through with Caltrans, the state, and the property owners, and that was resolved maybe 4, 5, 6 months ago, something like that. I think they finalized, but that was something that the county wasn't necessarily directly involved with, so I don't know what the deals were or what was ultimate resolution, but I know that it's been settled at this point. Yeah. We have speaking of that, so we can talk about the corners. We've got the Chevron station going in on the southeastern corner. On the northeastern corner, we've issued some grading permits, and there's a project going forward there, as well as Western Milling is looking at doing a truck facility as far as repair for their truck fleet and all of that. So and maybe compressed natural gas filling station there. So there's activity there. On the west side of the highway, we have a proposal for a service station and potentially a hotel and a restaurant over on that side as well. We haven't had any specific plans brought in for the old wooden shoe, that little area there. We've talked previously with a developer with interest, but there's nothing been proposed or brought forward yet on that site. So there's a lot of activity out there. I think, again, in the next coming few years, that whole thing is going to completely change.
Any questions for Mike?
Thanks.
You know, I was looking at the agenda the other day. Have I ever met Reed Schenke?
Yeah.
through the. He did sit here a few
Used to
times.
come here all the time.
No, but
You don't remember
I know
him?
that, but I'm just thinking, I'm trying to place the face and the name. I
Yes,
couldn't.
he used to sit here before he moved up.
Okay.
But are you suggesting you'd like to meet him again?
I would, maybe. I'm a senior, you know. And
We'll tell him he needs to.
people.
We'll tell him he needs to come to the planning commission and give a presentation on the
Put a name
director's
and a
role.
face together.
Again, my question, yeah, we can do that. We can get Reed here before, we'll bring him before your commission. But
I wanted to hear his
the
vision.
other thing, and I've thought about this in the past, and if there's topics of interest to the planning commission, that we've come in here before with the road or the bridge program and talked about that. We've talked about that. If there's something of interest that the commission really wants to have a report or learn more about, we can, whether it's within the RMA or whether it's within a different department that's of some sort of interest, we can reach out to them to have a presentation regarding whatever that may be, so.
Yeah, that would be good.
We'll tell Reed he has to come talk to you.
Well, I just wanted to hear his mission statement and all that. I'm sure he's with us in spirit. You all do the heavy lifting, though.
Yes.
Um,
Before we, did Public Works have anything else?
Just a couple items. I do apologize, I wasn't here last time. This feels like a long time since I've been here. But we do have a chip seal program underway where we've allocated $1.2 million to prolong the life of our roads. We also have a number of projects underway as well, or soon to be underway. We have about $15 million of road rehabilitation projects that are either underway or will be. We also have a number of community projects, sidewalk projects, ADA improvements in the community of Traver, Woodville, Orosi, Strathmore, just to name a few. And we also this fiscal year, we are also gearing up to apply for active transportation funds, in which last cycle we did receive about $1.2 million to work on a project in Ivanhoe. And for the Highway Safety Improvement Program, we did receive over $4 million to improve the safety of our roadway network. We're gearing for that. Hopefully, we've been successful in the past, and we hope that we continue to be successful. So we're gearing for that. And the last thing is I would like to introduce Roxana Mendez. She will be under my wing at Public Works.
Good.
So she's in Engineer 1. She graduated from UC Merced, unless you guys want her to talk about herself.
Yeah, yes, please.
Oh, that's the real brain school, isn't it?
Good morning. Roxana Mendez. I am from Lemoore, California. I graduated from UC Merced with a bachelor's in mechanical engineering, and I am now an Engineer 1 for Tulare County.
Excellent. I think we took a tour of that.
Yeah, we did, with the Planning Commissioners Conference. It was great, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's growing a lot right
really
now.
isolated up there.
Yeah, very isolated.
No reason not to study, right?
Well, Tulare County,
We
Tulare-
find reasons.
Tulare County came in second for that UC, so we almost had you right here in South
Oh.
County,
Where would it have been?
down by the Delano area, south of Tulare.
They were protesting something the day we were there, weren't they? There was a big crowd out there.
Yeah, they were. Gosh,
I forget what it was.
it was something worthwhile, I
Yeah,
remember.
it was good. It was good. Memorable. Well, good luck
Thank you.
and welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Anything on CEQA? No. We're good then. Thank you.
Very good. Item 7, anything from our planning commission orders?
Yeah, I just want to update on the conference. We now have a title. We're planning for Fire Safe California, and then we'll have a Oroville Dam update and the future of the State Water Project. We're kind of combining two sessions. One will be morning, one will be afternoon. We'll have registration material, should be ready before the Wednesday or Thursday of next week. The website's being updated now with all the information on the October conference. And also, we have a tentative agreement from Tulare County to provide a session within the conference, a training session for new planning commissioners. So we're not only going to share our expertise with our new ones here, but we'll also be able to share it with other commissioners from around the state. So we find ourselves in a good position where our planning commission actually functions quite smoothly, and we're able to set a good example and perhaps help other counties to do the same.
John, I have a suggestion. As you know, Maria, what the Planning Commission's purpose is to protect the health, safety, and welfare through land use. And I was thinking it'd be interesting from the medical community there. They have a strong medical community. How did that fire affect the health of people who live there? I mean, there was everything from smoke to displaced people, just what impact? Because that had to have been a huge
Well,
number.
it was also on the water quality too, so.
Right.
That's a great suggestion, and we are working on a topic that'll,
There's like 10 or 15,000 people that had to move to Chico.
The economics too, because when I
oh,
was,
it's incredible.
when I was buying my latest vehicle, had I wanted to drive up there for it, I would have probably gotten it for $4 or $5 grand cheaper than down here. I had so many offers from up there.
Well, the thing about this fire that is just about a year ago now, it was November 8th, actually. That fire has changed the entire way we look at so many things in the state of California. And that's why we felt some urgency to come to Chico and do our conference this year there. So we're going to get a lot of lessons, especially for counties like Tulare County that have big rural wildland interface areas. One thing I just filmed a video last week of the acting superintendent of the park speaking, and we've all been aware that there's 10 million dead trees in Tulare County. Well, over 5 million of those are in the parks. The parks interface with a big area of Tulare County. So this is one thing that CAL FIRE is going to address within our conference too, how this is changing and how it's going to affect all of us. So I hope everyone can attend. We're trying to make it user-friendly up there. Book your room in the Diamond Hotel as soon as possible. And we'll also have a backup. I'm negotiating with the courtyard up there, the Marriott Courtyard, so that we have some backups for people that don't get in our room block originally.
What time does it run? Like, what time does it start?
Well, you have to be there the Thursday night. It's critical because we have a 9 a.m. session on Friday morning. This is October 25th. And then the bus tour day of Paradise and Oroville Dam will be the following day on Saturday. And we'll also have some special activities in downtown Chico. Downtown Chico's done a great idea in rehabbing and, kind of redeveloping their downtown area, and it's a very vital place. Now, they have a state university there that's fueling the economy along with what's happened in the fire. So it's going to be interesting. We're going to find out how both of those things fuel this economic engine that's going on in Butte County right now.
Well, they lost 28,000 homes, I think, up in
Well,
Paradise.
was it
28,000?
I thought it was 18,000, somewhere in
Well,
there.
it was close to that.
Yeah, it was a lot of people were, had to be relocated, but other people are okay. There's some homes that didn't burn and people want to stay there, but they have all kinds of health and water quality issues. So the state's trying to decide, is it feasible to rebuild in an area that was totally decimated by fire? We're going to find out.
That's a little bit of a segue. I read this guy, Dan Walters, out of Sacramento. He wrote a good article last weekend, and I'm going to give it to Mike Washam, on housing crisis looms large in Californians, over Californians. It's interesting that the state says there's an estimated shortage of 2.3 million units, and the state officials say we need to build 180,000 units a year to cope with the deficit, and we're now at 80,000 after you subtract off these fires a year. We'll never catch up, is basically what's happening. But there's a new Senate bill, 330, that replaces the bill SB 50 that got defeated, that's going to ask the housing, it's going to try to fix the housing supply by overriding local restrictions for forms of housing development. In other words, the cities that are NIMBYs can't turn down things that are, being asked to be developed outside of their city limits. So that's sort of apropos to some of my interest areas. But the point is, there's a lot of opportunity in our county for developing, and I'm talking county, for new housing. And Strathmore's a good example.
Yes, bring the developers.
Bring the developers.
Bring the developers.
They're there. And it's interesting, and I'll make this comment because I deal with a few of these fellows, Lennar and Woodside, Bill with Summit, and KB and Horton. They all don't know much about the county and the process that they have to go through. It's kind of interesting. I've asked them, well, you know, do you know how to develop in the county? And they go, you know, we're not really sure. And I've always said, it's a great process, it's very streamlined, you'll get through your permitting for tentative and final maps a lot faster.
Right. Well, and through the chair, I mean, it's Mike and myself have met with a few of those people, and it's always the infrastructure issue. So it's a little disingenuous for the state to try to force. And RENA's built for 100,000 homes a year statewide already. So that's what it was when the initiation was back in the late 60s. So it's a little disingenuous to say build homes, but don't provide state funding for infrastructure improvements. And the developers and the bonding market is not what it used to be. So the risks are so much, the risks were always there, but there's always funding mechanisms through government bonding to get that done. And the bonding markets are much shyer than they used to be. So to create fees or do something like that, it's a little bit more difficult. And so the state should put a little bit of money where their mouth is as far as.
Don't you think they're going to have to do that, though?
I would think they are, and we're seeing some new recent grants coming down the line that speak to that. But again, you know, like all the grants we go for, we are having to compete with Los Angeles and San Francisco. And the first round of ATP grant funding, we got large chunks of because it was meant for us. But after that, those two big areas, lobbyists came out, and then all of a sudden the grant evaluations changed. We got that big SGC grant, and we pried it out of the hands of Los Angeles, you know. I mean, they were ready to just give it to them. So, I mean, even if we get there, I mean, there has to be a lot greater lobbying effort from the Central Valley communities and existing developers to get that money funneled down here for grant improvements and not make it so hard for the Dennis Kellers of the world or people who run these CSDs to have to go out and get the funding, and they don't always get it. So, and self-out.
That's the challenge. I mean, the money that comes out is usually planning directed. Well, we're so far past that in Tulare County. We're not putting hurdles up for development. I mean, that's the whole reason behind the housing element was to knock those things down, those restrictive zoning and all that. We don't have that. Our issue is with infrastructure. If we're more than willing to streamline everything, get things built, but it's the challenge that the state money thus far has been for planning, to plan for zoning changes and to do this and that. Well, that's fine, but we don't have the infrastructure, and we need the infrastructure. If we had the infrastructure, you'd see the county blossom as far as housing development and all that. But without that, we don't have it.
Who's lobbying for infrastructure?
We have a lobbyist on call for the county, so we put forward our opinions on certain legislation that's going through. It needs set-asides. Again, when we're competing with LA or San Francisco, you know, everything's focused on breaking down the zoning restrictions, and it's also focused on mass transit. So you're looking at, it's a challenge when we don't have the same numbers of people, because the density in LA, you can go 13 stories of condos, and it makes sense, and it fits all the criteria of all this state money. Well, the problem is, it's cheaper to build a two-story buildings out here. Self-help will never build a high-rise because it's more effective and economically better to build two-story structures. But the state doesn't see that. They see it needs to be a high-rise, and it just doesn't. We're in a different reality in the Central Valley as opposed to the Bay Area and LA, and they need to understand that. So there really needs to be set-asides. When there's a certain amount of funding out there, there should be set-asides for rural areas that can do it. Unfortunately, we're not considered a rural area for most of the planning. We're not, unfortunately. So, but there needs to be set-asides so areas such as Central Valley can take advantage of a piece of these, as opposed to just everything going to the Bay Area or LA.
Well, you know, the problem is it's somewhat problematical. Not somewhat, it is a great deal, this bullet train and all of the commentary about it. But if that ever happens somehow in some form, I've talked with builders in Madera, and I've asked them, who are you selling these to? 30% are coming from San Jose. Can you believe that? Now, once people in the Bay Area or LA can figure out how to get here, there'll be plenty of demand, and then infrastructure will just be forced upon us And some, I hear what you're saying about no money, but there's a lot of people waiting to move out of the Bay Area. I've got friends up there that I used to live there for 30 years, and they can't afford to live there anymore. So where do they come? They come down here, and they're willing to make the trip all the way to Madera
You know, I
to
have to
commute.
reinforce what Mike is saying too, because I get a lot of for sale from Los Angeles. And I saved it because I still can't put my arms around it, but about an 8,000 square foot lot with a house, and they're selling it as a apartment complex of 18 units. How do you get 18 units on that's just a single family lot here. I mean, R15 means the 5,000 square feet. So like you said, you just answered part of it. They must be going way up. And this is a single family house type neighborhood. And I don't think they do anything for parking either.
Well, even to Mike's point, even when you have someone like Self-Help who's going out to grant funding to help fund their projects, they have to hit a 20 unit per acre density. And with Goshen, they're barely getting that. It's just not feasible to build anything even close to 20 units per acre, and they're really pressing it to the nth degree to make it happen. So all that grant funding's for 20 acres or more so it just doesn't, and that's to get to the infrastructure funding, because for a while there, everything had to be tied to affordable housing to get infrastructure funding. So again, it's not the lobbying efforts on the county's part that needs to happen. It has to be the lobbying efforts of the private banks, commercial banks, and the developers to get up there and have a voice, because it's not reaching this far down.
That density too is a huge social issue as far as health, police, all those things. So
it is a mixed bag. That's for sure.
Well, it's another issue that the fire safe is driving too, because if you can't rebuild in some of these areas, you have to develop other areas where you can, so that infrastructure goes first, planning for that, and then we have to put housing in places that are safe, that are fire safe. And this is what we're going to be doing at the conference.
Any other comments from staff? Commissioners? If that's the case, then there are no other items. We will adjourn and reconvene on August 28th, 2019, 9 a.m.